I'm Michael Gilbert, and this is Street Smart, helping you execute the dangerous curves of business and life.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into business, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a 30-second overview here.
30. Okay. So my name is Brenda Neckvatal. I am known as Brenda the HR lady. I've been in human resources now for about 23 years total. I've been in business for over 30. I started in the retail industry, and in retail is like one of the best business educations you can get because you touch everything. You touch everything from sales to marketing to finance to payroll to HR. I mean, you do all of it. And I was really attracted on the HR side of things, and I just pursued it. And so now I work with other HR professionals and businesses to help figure out their most critical and confusing and difficult people problems as they really sort through an overwhelm of information that's out there. Did I do it in 30 seconds or less?
That was 30 seconds.
I was right on the nose.
I got to redo it. So, you're in HR. What are some of the big issues that you see in business today as it relates to HR? Because I've got my own stories, but
most people do. Most people do have their own stories. One of the things that I'm seeing happening, we're coming back from COVID, right? We're starting to see businesses opening back up. We're going to have an absolute downslide on the commercial real estate. So we are going to have an industry we've had industry struggle throughout COVID. We're going to have a next wave of industry struggle when that is on the commercial real estate side for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's already happening, but I don't think we've seen it at its low.
But I see opportunity.
Oh, I agree with you. I totally agree. I'm talking about for existing business, people who are in existing commercial. It's going to open up opportunity for investors and a lot of really good, I think creative ways to use what is now being viewed as commercial real estate. It's probably going to wind up turning into a lot of other things. Like Amazon is using old anchor stores, to move in and actually create, micro distribution centers. Right. I mean, people are getting creative about it, right? Right. We have a mutual friend who wants to go out and buy a skyscraper. He's hell-bent set on doing it. We know he's looking at some hotel property to put up a luxury hotel. I mean, it's just like there is opportunity out there. What goes down, always somebody else will pick it up. And so, but as far as the people aspect of it goes, I think, there's an absolute big push, and rightfully so, to go ahead and get people back in. But I think what has happened that we have to figure out, and Harvard Business Review actually just wrote an article on this not too long ago. And it's about really how we as businesses, we've kind of over manufactured the employee role. And we have yet for a second time in our economic history in under 20 years have asked employees now to do more with less. And so we have people that are getting tired, they're getting frustrated, employers are taking advantage of that in a positive way, which impacts the business, but It does put a big demand and a big burden on employees and how they engage in business.
It's not as if we weren't asking a lot from them in the first place.
Depends on the job. Some companies they were already, and that increased, the role. I mean, if you look at some cultures out there like SpaceX for quite a long time, and this is open source information. Anybody can find this, but like in the early, like around like 2012, SpaceX was starting to get hauled into court because they were overworking their employees, and then when they didn't live up to that level of expectation, they were pushing them out. And
overworked.
The overworked was like between like 50 to 70 hours, 7 days a week. And if you weren't part of that mindset, you didn't belong.
But come on, Brenda, you and I work, double that. Perhaps.
Sure, hey. But that's our choice, right? Not everybody, and we're capable of we're capable of shouldering that because we're entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs. Wow. Anyway, we can shoulder that, right? And we're going to be successful entrepreneurs as a result of that because we're not willing to unload that burden, right? We find new ways of doing things, a new way of business. We may wind up expanding our team, but I guarantee you nobody's going to take on as much work as we will. And, but
Oh, I
when,
run circles around the younger guys.
yeah,
You
well,
know?
that's true. And, you know, and they're learning, right? But when we start placing more work, when we start having to shrink, because that's what happens when people in business start feeling the pressure of loss and the pressure of the squeeze, our aperture starts narrowing up, right? And that's a normal defense mechanism. It's totally natural. It's in our DNA. And that's what it really takes as an employer to really kind of open up and, you know, kind of see this is for the long game. This isn't in the short haul. And, you know, if what you put on employees in the short haul, you have to find ways to free that up in the long. And if you say that I think that's one of the mistakes that people have made. They say, you know, like, hey, this is only temporary. And then, you know, those responsibilities don't go away. And then inevitably you wind up losing somebody that has a lot of institutional knowledge that you really rely on. I think that's a risk. That doesn't happen everywhere. It's a risk and it is happening.
So what would you say is the number one cause of employees leaving? Good staff, people you want to keep long term. I have my mentor gave me some great advice. Oh, good. This has probably been, I was 27.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share that with you in a moment, but I wanted to get your take.
I think if you look at it generationally, it's going to be different. So we're Gen Xers. I'm going to assume you're an Xer, not a boomer. And if you're a boomer, say thank you. But, you know, Xers, you know, we're not in the job hopping business. That's just not how we operate. I mean, yeah, we do take up, you know, we'll leave to pursue an opportunity that is going to enhance our future for the long haul, and we'll stay, you know, for quite a while. But, you know, we know that millennials are the individuals, you know, they'll stay for 2 years and they'll hop because it's a different experience, or it may not necessarily be a new opportunity, but they're looking for different types of experiences. So, you know, to them innately, it means it's something
it's not
different.
always about money either.
Exactly. Whereas at Gen Xers, money tends to come with that. Right.
Right.
And now we've got Gen Z who hasn't really kind of started that path yet. I mean, they're still relatively new. You know, for them, it could be, you know, innovative in tech, right? But they're they're a combination of Y and Gen X because we are the parents of Gen Z. So they're a little bit more like us. They grew up in an environment, they were born during the Great Recession. So they saw parents, you know, being more careful with their money. They weren't as, you know, they were conservative, and they were born into a hardship, an economic hardship. So they see the world a little bit differently as a result of that. So I think that right now, to answer your question, in the marketplace, I think people are leaving because the marketplace has opened up in different areas, but this is not like what we saw back in 2009, 2010, 2011, and 12, where this is a candidates market, an employees marketplace where it's just a wide swath of opportunity. I think it depends on the industry. And I think frontline industry is the one that is actually suffering the most right now, trying to find people, because we still have an economic stimulus in place to where we have unemployment when people are still making more on unemployment than they ever have working. And that's a fact. We also are up against a lot of unemployment fraud. You know, a couple months ago, California announced that they had $20 million in unemployment fraud, and that's massive, and it's going to increase. Illinois struggles with it too, right? Washington State, Oregon, a lot of states are struggling with this. So people are figuring it out. And how do you get the money without actually being entitled to it, like really entitled to it? And it's a problem, and that's just all the data. That's not, you know, that's not suspicion. That's actual research. Anybody can find that.
We didn't qualify for any of it, so.
No, exactly. And so, so that's making it complicated. And I really think that, you know, people are just going to have to get very creative. I think networking really has to play a major part in recruiting now, more so than ever. And the average recruiter doesn't get to go out and network. They sit behind a desk, right?
They do now.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, so, you know, the job market's really interesting, and people leave, I think, for a wide variety of reasons. I don't think it's just one sole source reason. People, you know, got out of their they had to go home because of COVID. Some people have opted to stay home because of, the benefits that come with COVID. It's kind of all over the place. But I think there's a couple of themes that we just talked about that exist. What's your
Right.
theory?
Well, what you just said, I just had a conversation. I just had dinner with my third daughter. I have 4 girls. My 21-year-old, who is the third one, she was talking about her younger sister, who is 16, and she was explaining the difference between Gen Xers and Gen Z. And I'm like, wait, when's the cutoff? And what are you going to call the next ones? And she goes, we don't know. We'll start over. And Gen A. But she goes, look, your generation's the one that screwed this all up. It's like, excuse me? I said,
wait, is she blaming the boomers or is she blaming the Xers?
The Xers.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I said, well, okay, let's see. Let's talk about who's paid for what, when, and where. And the difference in the mindset of you versus me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you can put me in any category you want, but I've been an entrepreneur my entire career. So to sit there and group me with someone, a whole generation, a little bit different story. So I had to explain the difference to her of the different mindset. But interestingly enough, she came back and said something to the effect of, and this was even before, I think it was maybe around her birthday last year, around September. And she said, Dad, I want you to teach me to invest. And I said, well, why don't you get a job? Excuse me. Because she is the actress of the family, and she's really good at what she does. But I just said, look, how about you go get a job first? So what do you really want to do? And she goes, well, I really want to be a director. I said, well, you need to go to school for that. And she goes, no, I don't. And I'm okay with that. But you're going to have to learn from someone.
Yeah.
And I have friends here in the Dallas market that, my friend Michael Kane, and not that Michael Kane, but Michael, he started the Dallas International Film Festival. It's been around, a long number of years now. He did the Jobs film. And I said, let's go talk to Michael. Michael's going to be able to give you a better understanding of how to be a director and the specific school she wants to go to, which I'm looking at the cost. I'm like, oh, that's a lot cheaper than, a 4-year and get to that very quickly.
Yeah.
But anyway, she was just kind of pointing out the differences. And I go back to what my old mentor said. And my old mentor told me, he said, and I'll give you the story. We're sitting in my office and I am interviewing. Here I am, 27 years old. I'm interviewing a guy that's 40 years old. And I think it's on a Friday because that's when Jerry usually showed up. So I'm interviewing the guy. Jerry just walks in, sits down, and the guy's saying, well, I really want $12 an hour. And of course, I was always taught to negotiate down, get a better. Well, the position only pays $9. And Jerry's over in the corner going, bullshit. And I look over and I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, do you really want to hire this guy? If you don't want to hire him, don't insult him by offering him less money. And he looks at this guy that we ended up hiring, but he goes, do you really want to work for this asshole? And he goes, yeah. And so he goes, great. Show up Monday. We're paying you $15 an hour. What just happened? The guy walks out and he looks at me and I look at him and we're all three doing the Mexican standoff. I'm like, wait, what's going on here? And I just got heisted by my own mentor. And he walks out and he goes, here's what I want you to think of. When you don't pay people enough, he goes, not everybody's motivated by money, but when you don't pay people enough or what they're asking for, they will always sit in the corner with their arms folded with the mindset of, I am not going to work any harder until you pay me more.
Yep.
He goes, on Monday morning, you're going to remind him, I am paying you more, therefore I expect more. And we've kind of held to that maxim ever since of every time we bring someone on, we overpay them.
Yeah.
And dude, they don't always stay, probably because of me. But
Mr. Positive.
I'm not the easiest guy to work with. I'm very demanding, and I I set expectations extremely high, probably more so for myself than anyone else. But that was kind of my mindset. But when, you talk to, what you just said, and then talking to my daughters and trying to get their mindset of the way different generations think, it's completely different. And so,
Yep.
Dealing with, the Gen Xers, versus, the Gen Z, I'm not even sure how to respond to that just yet, because, I think now they're starting to enter the workforce.
They are. Yeah. They're about 2 years in.
Yeah.
They're
So
3 years now into the workforce.
and now I have some, two of my daughters are in that age bracket.
Yeah, I have
So-
my oldest niece is a Gen Z, and she's in that bracket. And I'll tell you what, that girl works hard. She's overcome a lot of obstacles personally too. I'm very proud of her. And she's been studying how to be an MRI technician, and she wants to get into a program to where she gets into surgical MRI. So that way she's actually in the operating room. It's a specialty. It pays great money. Where she can actually be and operate. And so she in alongside the physicians and be part of that. And so she's doing very well about making those all important connections and working with really great radiologists
That's awesome.
to make that happen. Yeah, she's doing really good. But I'll tell you what, that kid, she's figured out how to pay for her own school. She's figuring out how to pay for her own stuff. And that is not where she started from. I can tell you that right now. So she's doing awesome at 24, 25 years old.
Right.
Just
Even
moving. Yeah.
Even my oldest, who is 27, we went through the period where she was traveling with this music festival, and I have my own story about the music industry. And, she would post these pictures online. I'm like, you got to put more clothes on, honey. Your sister's watching, and she goes, Dad, you were the original club kid. I've seen your pictures. and she's got the pictures of me. Come on, we're a product of the 80s and 90s. In the 80s, I had,
we know
the Flock of Seagulls haircut, and the 90s, I had the Kurt Cobain look. And
that's a two polar opposites.
So it went from, really kind of mohawk to long hair. And you can tell today, I'm just got the long flowing locks. But and she just kept doing this, and I said, man, and you're watching the pictures. I'm like, I know what kind of lifestyle this is. Been there, done that. And then all of a sudden, we're on vacation one year, and she goes, "Oh, I just finished my nursing degree." Wait, what? What the heck? It just blew me away. I'm like, yeah. And that's just the way they are. They solve things themselves. But I raised them that way. I really learned that from my former father-in-law when I was married. And he had 3 daughters. I've got 4. I watched what he did, and I always admired his stance of, Dad, I have a problem. And his response was always the same. And it was, all right, let's hear it. And then they would say, state the problem. And then he would finish with, sounds like you got it all figured out. And that's it. It's not, here's how you fix this. Here's what the answer is. Even if you ask, his name was Wayne. Even if you ask Wayne a question, he would always ask you, what are you going to do about it?
Yep, exactly.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I had to push him one time, and I said, Wayne, I really want an answer this time. Do you really want an answer, Michael? Or do you just want confirmation of what you're thinking? I said, just tell me what to do. Are you sure? So I had to really pull it out of him. So, we've worked with startups for most of my career. I've started just a ton of companies myself. At what point do you think your services come into play for, is it day 1? Is it day 5? Is it the first year, second year? At what time do you think it's important to bring on the HR lady?
My recommendation is always early and then later, because most people turn to HR when it's too late, when something has happened, right? Yeah. So like all of a sudden their employees are misclassified and they got busted by the Department of Labor or by the Workforce Development. And they're like, we don't know how to fix this. We registered everybody as contractors in 1099. And in fact, they should have been W-2s. And they go,
Right.
oops, and it's just like, okay, so now we got to put your infrastructure in place. And I think that's one of the biggest issues right there, is that people don't understand. If they've never worked with human resources and they've never studied it, right? They know it's important, but they don't know what it's about. And they don't understand that HR has a seat at the table, because our goal is to help, even though we're not producers of money, of revenue, but we save it. And when, money saved is money earned. It really is. You're
Right.
an investor. You
Absolutely.
understand that, right? But not everybody sees that. And so, they get into these situations and they say, well, I know all these other companies are doing it. And I'm like, well, just because, Junior jumped off a bridge, does that mean that you should do it too? It's like,
My attorney always told me, says, look, if you get audited by the IRS, don't say anything. Just let them do their job. Well, we've been doing that for 5 years. He goes, now that 1 year audit just turned into a 5-year
the
audit.
5-year audit. Exactly. And, and that's the thing, is that if you get audited by the Department of Labor because an employee has called in and said that they weren't being paid properly, or they have some sort of grudge against you guys, guess what? They will go back. So if the employee says, yeah, I said, I wasn't paid my overtime for the last 3 weeks, not only will the Department of Labor come in and actually look at that person's last 3 weeks, they will look at every transaction for every employee and every time punch for the last 3 years. And that is very expensive.
It's a lot of money.
And it takes 2 years to go through a 3-year audit.
So I know the roofing industry is rife with that. I used to own a roofing company, and they hire people as 1099 salespeople.
Yeah.
So explain to our viewers and listeners the difference between 1099, because I already know, I've already been down that road, of what the difference is between an FTE, full-time employee, and 1099, and what the law says about that.
Okay, so you got a couple of things here that you've thrown out. An FTE in the eyes of the Affordable Care Act is actual formula that will identify the number of physical bodies under the ACA that qualify you to actually be an applicable large employer, which means that you have to actually provide insurance, or if you don't provide it, let your employees take a subsidy and you eat a fine, which probably would be less than actually providing insurance. That's what an FTE really is, right? If you look at a compensation matrix, FTE is synonymous with full-time person, and 0.5 of an FTV is like a part-time person, right? It's a half a person, and that's a 40-hour work week. So we got that out of the way. Then when you look at the difference between a W2 and a 1099, a 1099 is an independent contractor. And recently the IRS actually has made a very distinct ruling on what a 1099 person is. Historically, what it has been is a 1099 is a person. So let's say, for example, you have like 15 computers, right? And they all need a massive upgrade. And you call my friend Larry, who, works over here in Hampton, and he's got a computer shop and he's very good. And you say, Larry, I need somebody to come in and actually update these services. But I would like somebody as a consultant, because we may wind up having some other stuff that we're running into. He says, no problem. We're going to go ahead and send blah, 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 because we don't do that. He's an independent contractor. You say, great. He fills out a W-9 that supports that. And now you've got a business relationship with an individual who is a contractor, right, and comes in and actually does work. And you have nothing to say over it except, thank you. Here are my problems. And where do I send the check? Right? There's no oversight. You're not providing them equipment. You're not giving them day-to-day guidance. You're not leading them, right? You're just telling them. He's
operating under his own banner.
Exactly, right? That is the nature of a 1099. Now, the more you start managing, you provide oversight. You give them a space to work. You start giving them information. You teach them. You train them. You provide for them.
Tell them when to show up, when to leave.
Exactly. Now you're getting that oversight where you are edging to the other side of that spectrum, where they really should be an employee. And I recently had somebody that I was talking to, there was a thread that was online that said, do I pay 1099? Do I pay W-2? And I met with them and I explained all of this with them. And he's like, well, I belong to a group online that is like 100 people that do the same thing that I do. And everybody has their employees as 1099s. And I'm really not afraid to break the law. And I said, well, first off, they are doing it wrong. And second off, good luck.
Yeah.
I can't help you with that. If you don't want to do it, if you want to take that risk, you could probably do it for a very short period of time until you correct it. But I wouldn't for the long haul, because what happens is that people will kick that stuff down the road. They'll kick that can down the road to the point where it doesn't even make sense doing it. But you see, here's the thing. It's like a tsunami, right? You wait and you wait and you wait, and all that water starts pulling away. And then all of a sudden the mad rush comes out. And once that happens, you can't control what's coming your way, because you should have known better in the beginning. You should have taken those steps, forward. And it is expensive to correct. It's expensive. You're going to get fined. You may even owe people back pay and overtime, right?
And penalties, interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? Depending upon where you are, what if a local government determines that really you shouldn't be in business, and now you get your business license yanked because you've had way too many violations, and the workforce development agencies are, so there's a lot to that, right? HR is business. It's people, but it's getting the people side of your business right. It's the people business side of your organization
Right.
correct. That's what it's about. And it's a combination of compliance, and it's a combination of, emotional intelligence and leadership. And with our current administrator, and I don't get into public, political conversations, but so this will be really neutral.
No.
But here's the thing, every president that comes in, they make changes, right? Every president does this. And we have a president who is very committed to being one of the strongest labor presidents that we've ever seen. He campaigned in it back in September. And he's serious. He's making changes left and right. And he's influencing agencies to do exactly those things. So, right now, I think HR as a business is actually starting to revert back to a compliance industry out of need, not out of progressive, HR influence that's happening. We have to go back to our roots and really stay compliant on these things. And I promise you, the EEOC is bringing in, they are bringing in more inspectors, right? OSHA is going to bring in more inspectors. That's already in the process.
Right.
The government has been reviewing all of their policies on actually how do they move forward with investigating, with holding companies accountable for this. This is actually happening right now, and the common person is not aware of this.
Right.
The information is out there. Everything I'm telling you is everything that I've seen in my daily reading. It's not a surprise to me whatsoever. President has 18 months to get his agenda out and done before we get into midterms, which we're already starting to see gubernatorial campaigning happening. And then after that, once they settle in, then we're back to a full-blown election again, right? So there's only so much time to make change happen, and he's on fire. And that's his camp. That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
And all we have to do is just figure out how do we make the most of this? How do we protect our business? Because our number one responsibility as leaders and as employers is to actually keep the doors open to pay payroll. That's our responsibility. It's not to make profit.
Oh, I thought it was for me to retire.
Well, yeah, okay. Sure. But that's
why I started business. I wanted to make money. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But that's our responsibility as employers is to make sure.
Well, I look at HR as an insurance policy, and most business owners, they look at HR as an evil necessity.
Yep. We're the no people.
Yeah. As our friend calls them, heralds, or isn't that what he calls?
Is that what he says?
Heralds. I think they're in HR.
He hasn't said that to my face yet.
Oh, you got to go read the I forget what book he wrote, and it's all in like all the lingo of the different people in different department of the business. And I'm like, heralds, that's a great name.
That's funny. I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah. So what do you think one of the things that we can do to prep now in advance? Let's just take away the current administration and not even discuss that.
Sure.
It's just, it is a compliance issue. It always has been a compliance issue. I remember when I had a billboard printing company, and I mean, one of our people was dipping their hands into a 5-gallon vat of, and we all did it. This is many years ago, and chemicals. We'll just throw them out on the railroad tracks. There was no
whatever.
EPA back then, but they were dipping their hands in these 5-gallon buckets of blanket wash and wiping the ink off their entire body. And so one of the guys shows up one day and he's got boils, like little bitty tiny blisters all over him. I said, you need to go to the doctor. So we sent him to the doctor at a little clinic that we used. And unfortunately, I had already had one guy lose his, the tip of his finger by pulling a big cutter down. And he goes, oh, I want to, he's pulling the cutter down. You got to have 2 hands on it. He sticks his hand in there to adjust it. And he cuts the tip of his finger off. And then this kid, and so OSHA shows up, and I am freaking out. And all they made me do back then was, you got to put a poster up on the wall, and you got to supply rubber blanket, rubber aprons and boots and this and that and all this other stuff. And I got lucky, is what I got.
Yeah, you did.
So, but that was a long time ago. That would never pass today.
Nope.
So what do you see, especially with technology, for the last 20 years has come to the forefront? What do you see as some of the, the big issues that need to be addressed up front, especially for startups or even mature businesses?
Honestly, it's, start figuring out what your infrastructure is now, right? And it's all going to be dependent upon your industry. So if you're in manufacturing, CDC's got specific requirements for manufacturing. Look, OSHA's ramping up. The president, I know we didn't want to talk about politics, but he's appointing a new administrator to OSHA.
Right.
And he comes from California. And if you know anything about California, you know that regulations are harder in California than anywhere else.
We were looking to open an office back 30 years ago and decided against it because of that. And now it's even worse.
Yeah, now it's even worse. Exactly. And so this guy's coming from California, right? And I didn't even hear his name until this morning because I had submitted. Yeah, I was actually being considered for a Forbes article, and I wasn't even aware. I hadn't even seen it. And I even researched it. I'm like, oh, this guy that they're talking about bringing in, he comes from a unionized organization. It turns out it was somebody else. But that's the thing. It's just like some of this information isn't readily available. So, get yourself in place, like dot your I's and start crossing your T's. It's never too late to build infrastructure. It really isn't. There's an old Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is to do it now. Right.
Right.
So start now's your opportunity to start scaling that stuff up, because you don't want to be in a position where investigators are starting to come out and they're starting to do random stuff and you're not prepared. Then it's really painful at that point. Right. Or if you have an employee, because employees are smart, they may not necessarily understand the full scope of the law quite like I do and other HR practitioners, but all they have to do is Google it. And if they understand it differently, it tells you what to do. The preamble of the American with Disabilities Act, I've never seen this before, and I've read a lot of laws. In the preamble of the American with Disabilities Act, it actually tells you if your civil rights have been violated as a disabled person, here's the phone number that you call. The government's serious about this. Yeah. So it's not a scare tactic. It's a get your house in order, right? Get the people side of your business right. And when you do that, you have less of a worry. I mean, something comes up, you've got your catch nets in place, right? It's going to take.
That's where legal and HR come into play. To me, they're both insurance policies. If you have your agreements in place, make sure HR is in the same room as legal, and making sure that your legal agreements are actually legal with HR. Because I've had attorneys and HR people sit there and argue with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you know what? If you really want to do it right, don't use general counsel. Use an employment attorney. It's a specialty of law. These people do this every single day.
Right.
Yeah. And look, I love general counsel. They have a time and a place for everything. Employment law and specialty is not it. I mean, would you want general counsel to make your build your personal trust for you, for your family? Probably not.
That's why I have 4 attorneys.
There you go. Right?
People
But
like, "You have 4 attorneys?"
that's right. Well, that's like what you
Right,
told me
4
last week.
attorneys.
That's because you're smart.
I said that to
So,
you.
yeah, you did. Yeah. I think you were trying to sell me like $2 million in funding, actually.
Yeah. So I don't know what that was about. So where do we want to go from here? What's next for you?
For me,
So do you cover every state?
Mhm.
Do you?
Yep, I do. I've got clients all over the US. I've got HR professionals that follow me all over the world. Just in Clubhouse alone, I've got a 7,200 person following, which is
Wow, that's awesome.
crazy. Yeah. I mean, I learn about stuff that's going on in the Middle East and Asia, and apparently over in the Middle East, there's areas where there's a lot of, and I don't understand why this would be, but there's a lot of false job advertisement out there, which is crazy. I don't know what that's about. I just recently learned that.
I'm going to
There's
post
a lot
a
of
fake job.
yeah, they post a fake job, and I have no idea. I don't know what the benefit of doing that is, but somebody's doing some serious lead gen.
I would just look at it and go, what a waste of time. I mean, they got to be farming something, right?
Yeah. And then, you look down in Australia and over in New Zealand, they haven't had COVID issues. I mean, they had it under control and lockdown, but they also have a wide swath of land with a smaller population, right?
It is locked down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty tight.
Yep.
I have friends in Australia. One of my daughters lives in New Zealand.
Yep.
So,
yep.
They're all about.
They had 2 COVID cases in New Zealand, and that was it.
Yeah.
There's 6 or something like that. That was it.
Wow,
So, but their employment issues are different. They're still back in.
They go the other way.
Well, no, theirs is like they still kind of, and I'm not this like raging feminist either, but one of the biggest concerns that I hear from women is that men just don't want to pay attention to what they have to say. And even with the SEALs that I've worked with, they're like, yeah, people got men in Australia, they're fun, but they're rough on women, and they're kind of a little bit in the Stone Age yet. And
hey, at one time I had daughters, a wife, and a female dog. I got used to not being listened.
Yeah, real quick, right?
No one listens.
Yeah, but that's a lot of feedback, and that's like the number one thing that women want is they want to be heard, and they want to crack that. They want to crack that glass ceiling.
What I learned is that they don't want me to fix anything. And so I'm like, great, I'm empowering you to do your own stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
And then when that doesn't work, I get hit from both sides. Well, you didn't do this. Wait a minute, I want you to do this. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's like ants swarming a hill.
I mean, in the old days, I used to say, we will never have an HR department. And we usually don't. But you still have to be compliant, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Because some of the things that get said around here, probably wouldn't fly in corporate,
Well, and you're right, but you know what? That is also part of a culture, and there's a lot of businesses. I mean, look where we were last week, right? And look at the stuff. We're going to keep that quiet, right? We're not going to reveal the source, but we're part of, we're in a room of 100 people, and nothing is sacred. I mean, let's just put it that way. And
but it's a safe place.
That's the culture,
right?
That's the culture. And yes, it is a safe place, but you know what? There's going to be one person that walks in that eventually is going to wind up being offended by something like that. But here's the thing. When I was talking to somebody else, it was like somebody asked me like, oh my God, your skin must just fall off when you hear stuff. I'm like, look, everything that they said, I've heard it before. Right.
Right.
And if I get offended by stuff like that in a culture like that, that's my problem, not theirs. That's the culture that's built. But here's the thing. If that company were to open up employment to bring somebody in and they're interviewing, the vicar's wife, the pastor's wife, she's not going to be a fit, but she may be that person that could
preacher's kid would be
right. Do everything right. Probably, but do everything that they need to do, be that one person that's reliable. And it's just like, that's not a fit. Then you have to be very upfront. Look, this is a company where we believe in having off-color jokes. It's not meant to offend anybody. But if you can't stomach that, then this isn't the place for you.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Because anybody that knows me, I'm all about girl power. I got 4 girls,
sure.
So, but yeah,
Yeah.
we don't hold anything back. My youngest daughter had her own YouTube channel. They shut her down because her and I are unfiltered. Yeah, big time.
But that's the thing. It's like, you know what? You can be unfiltered and you can say things, but
She was mad. She was not happy.
but it's not, yeah. But, you know, a sense of propriety is different for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, yeah, I mean, does a company, so can you have off-color humor and it still not be sexual harassment? Yeah, absolutely you can.
Absolutely.
But I think the company has to make that abundantly clear. But when you operate like that, yeah, it's going to create some challenges that you're going to have to overcome, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is actually happening.
Doesn't that have to be in your policy as well?
What
your
does
handbook?
what have to be your policy?
Should it be in your handbook of what your operating procedures are as far as HR?
Well, operating procedures are different. See, a handbook is
I
an
meant for-
operating procedure. A handbook is a book that tells employees what their rights are and what an employer's rights are.
Right.
And what their obligations are, right?
But how many companies actually have one?
Quite a few. Quite a few companies actually do have employee handbooks, and there's
Okay, let me ask you a better question. How many companies do not have one?
quite a few.
That's the answer.
Same answer. Yeah, it's the same answer.
That's the answer I was driving for there.
Yeah, even better question is how many companies have one and they disregard it. Those are the companies that really get into problems right there, right?
Yep.
But that's the thing. It's like, you know, if you permit off-color jokes, then you have to make sure that, you know, look at a record company, right? Look at a record label. How many years?
Right.
I mean, do you really think that anybody is going to win a case with Motley Crue recording in their record studio and all of a sudden HR is going to come in and say, you can't say that? You know, it's like, give me a break. Have you read the book? You know? So, you know, it's like, it is what it is until it's a problem.
Right.
And if you're not clear about what your culture is, if you're not clear that, hey, listen, we swear, we drink, we don't do anything illegal here.
Right.
But we tell off-color jokes. And if that is going to be a problem for you, we want to wish you the best of luck now before you start, because we like you, but I don't think you're going to be happy here. And I think that's appropriate. And very few HR professionals will actually come out and say exactly what I just did, but they will agree with it. They won't be the ones coming out and saying it though.
Right. I just had a friend. I voiced some extreme frustrations of dealing with technology issues yesterday, and it was rife with profanity because that's how I felt. And it was like, and if I need one more app, that's what I was complaining about. It's like, I just don't need another app.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine I've known for a long while, she goes, Michael, you can kind of clean that up a little bit. And I'm like, not today. Not today.
Not happening. Nope, not happening. You know, my advice to anybody who's in the HR seat is that, you know, when you're an HR pro, you hear everything that comes out of a leader's mouth. I mean, if you have a real seat at the table, you're going to hear everything. You're going to hear how they feel. You're going to hear how they're pissed off. You're going to hear exactly what you just said, right? Until it starts crossing an ethical boundary, which means that I've been in the boardrooms behind closed doors with CEOs, and sometimes some of the things that they said is some of the dumbest stuff that crosses an ethical boundary with me, right? I've actually heard a CEO say, I'm not firing somebody because he's black. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's like, the guy's incompetent. He's going to wind up getting people hurt, but you're not going to terminate him because he's black. To me, now we're in an ethical breach here because you're not looking out for how many other people work for your company. And this guy's in a position to inflict harm. That's where I draw my limit, right? That's where I draw my limit is that if you're only looking out for the one and not the many, in a situation like that, I'm out.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good insight.
Yeah, it happens, you know, and that statement could just come out of sheer frustration, right?
Right.
But, you know, it's like drinking. It's amazing how the truth tends to bubble up. You know, if that's really what you're afraid of, wait till 2 or 3 other people out in the field actually get hurt or mortally wounded.
Right.
Then I don't want to hear it.
That's why we don't let, we typically don't let employees drink
Right.
at any function
Right.
because things get said.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
And
you know,
and I want to make sure that I'm very clear on something here, that the person that we were chatting about actually wasn't capable of performing the position,
right.
but
It
they
has
weren't
nothing to
willing
do
to
with
let has
Right.
absolutely nothing to do with his background, right? We had a very diverse organization, but just because you have a diverse organization, you still need people to be competent to do the job. And if you're in an industrial site like that, where people's lives are at stake, it doesn't matter if you're pink polka dotted or pinstripe. It doesn't matter, right? People's lives are at stake, and that's what you have to protect everybody at that point. So,
Yep.
yeah.
So
But
how
the guy
do
was
how do
incompetent.
people reach you? How do they find
They
you?
can, yeah, absolutely. They can actually find me over at BrendaTheHRLady.com. That's a good place to hit me up. I'm on all the social with as Brenda the HR Lady. You can find me everywhere. LinkedIn's the only one that won't let me do Brenda the HR Lady because they require my last name, and that is Brenda Neckvatal. So
And you said you're on Clubhouse as well. Is it
I am on
Brenda the-
Clubhouse as Brenda the HR Lady. So yeah, all of my social stuff now is Brenda the HR Lady. So it's just because it's easier.
I wonder if we'll be able to remember that. What was it? Well, thanks so much for coming on. Any last things you want to tell business owners before we part?
Oh my gosh. Yes. You know what? I will tell you this one thing.
We have
This
3
one
more
last
hours.
thing. This is my one live and die rule that I tell everybody, right? And if you ever question as to whether you need HR or not, or if you're not working close with your HR person or not, and you think that you should or shouldn't, you don't know what to do, just remember this one very important live and die rule of mine. In the absence of information, people make stuff up.
Last question. What's the one word you would use to describe an entrepreneur?
Beast.
I like it.
Love it.
I like it. Brenda, thank you so much for being on Street Smart. Guys, you can find her at on any of the social media at Brenda the HR Lady. And I guess I'll see you here in a few weeks. You coming
Yeah,
up
I know.
again? Yeah,
Dallas is
awesome.
coming up. It's
Yeah,
going to be great.
I'm excited. Thank
Me
you so
too.
much for coming on. We'll talk to you
Well,
soon.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.